injured people leave Banjul and go to a private clinic, a small clinic, completely out of the center, defies description from the medical point. What was stopping them from going there? What is the scare? Why do they turn their backs on the facility that they own? Taxpayers, hereditary, whatever. The facility is for, even if the staff are maybe 90% non-Gambia, it doesn't matter. That scare is there. That factors which denies them due access. And medically, I recognize this as one of the saddest things ever. Once I saw, they weren't mimicking, they were bona fide injured. But people just really turn their backs on it. It's blind faith or denial. And this would be a sad thing for the country to, depending on political experience. You go political, if you are against the government or something, you are part of the government machinery, government institutions, the government best, what the government stands for. Why do they have to be denied that? That's the one thing that stands out in my mind. Apart from that, I think the whole problem lies with the government and the way they use and manipulate the security apparatus, making the ordinary individual the enemy. Non-government are not enemies. But you've got to get that thing out of one's mentality, out of one's psychology, And I think one of the important things that should emerge from a commission like this is to state that it's a fundamental flaw in the abuse of power, because it pervades into everything: transportation, job seeking, medical facility, ferry, whatever. You've got to break that myth. The others are just small, opportunistic things that, hospitals say, no, you can't treat this guy because he's this party or that sort. Where does it come from?
And in fact, I want to ask you a question about that. Considering what happened to your patients and why they came to see you in the first place, wasn't it a risk for you to actually treat all those patients? We're talking a large number of victims from a single incident. Wasn't it a risk for you, considering what was happening at the time?
I feel the risk only when you said it. It never occurred to me. I mean, maybe I'm a bit dim in the head. I know over the period, this is really going from the beginning of the formations. Some people have the capacity to conceal their faith, their beliefs, and their support. I come from a clan who do not share that. I think your chairman will tell you that Nyaninkas are very down to earth and can be the most frustrating problem for any individual if you want to deny them certain basic rights. In answer to your question, maybe I should have considered those as threats, but only now do I need, you have to have a bodyguard, you have to have, of course the marabouts take part of the credit for it. But no, I think maybe there's a risk, but I think the country, or what I would have denied myself, will be a far greater risk. So I didn't consider it crucial.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. CEESAY, for your courage at the time, and thank you for your testimony. I have concluded my questions, so I will yield the floor to the commissioners, who may ask you additional questions and then allow you to make a final statement at the end. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council, for that. And Nkotoke, Dr. CEESAY, thank you very much. You have always been an inspiring role model for the boys who grew up in Bansang. We all wanted them to follow your footsteps in education and service. And that is still there, always inspiring and always brave. Thank you so much for sharing with the Commission the untold stories of massive brutality visited on innocent and defenseless civilians by the security forces who were acting as agents of the state. I hope we don't have this kind of thing repeated in our country again, but a big thank you to you for agreeing to come and testify before the Commission and share these stories. Very difficult, but you stayed brave in dealing with it. Deputy Commissioner, you have a point you wanted to make? Yes. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. CEESAY, for your very lucid testimony. And thank you also for your benevolence in treating those patients free of charge at a very critical stage in their lives. You have described some very critical cases of human rights violations against some persons who came to your clinic for medical attention. These persons are of great interest to the TRRC, not only for hearing what happened to them, but also for their personal interest in terms of reparations. So we are calling out to them, if they have had your evidence, that they do present themselves before the Commission and state their cases so that they will be eligible for reparations. We're looking forward to hearing from them either as direct beneficiaries, if they are still alive, and if they are not alive, if there are close members of their families who can come in as indirect victims to tell the Commission what happened to their loved ones. We thank you very much once again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sam, you have any questions to ask? Imam Diallo.
CEESAY, I want to congratulate you for your bravery and for standing to maintain your profession and ensure that you do justice to Gambian citizens. What you did at the time these things were happening is a manifestation of your truthfulness to your profession. Very few doctors would have attempted or accepted to attend to these people in that situation. Thank you very much for what you have done for your nation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, Dr. CEESAY, would you have some closing remarks to make? If you do, please proceed.
Thank you, commissioners and all organizers in support of this almost landmark commission and with its objectives. The problem with most developing countries is to put institutions at the back and personal power and greed in the upfront. This choice is an enemy to development. Now, fortunately, this is the first time in Africa, or in fact the world, where you have a situation as bizarre as this, where a leadership who's not been tried, a leadership who has not got the mandate, the like of the people, is put in absolute total charge of the lives or the death or the prosperity or the poverty of its people. Institutions must be built on fair, competent, with clear mandates and clear authority, not individuals. The experience in Rwanda, after probably the worst, certainly worse than what we experience here, where genocide is committed by neighbors against neighbors, school children against classmates, purely on ethnic lines. That's not the situation here. Here we have a crime committed by an individual and his entourage, undermining the authority and the independence of the system for their own greed. It looks simple, certainly much simpler than Rwanda's, but Rwanda has got completely turned around. They are now, I use the word civilized, not from buildings, but the attitude of the people. There's more social cohesion in tribes who were just butchering each other's children from that happened in Rwanda. There was so much inveterate hatred of the individual. We haven't got to that point. Fortunately, when the people of the Gambia decided, when Gambia decided, we hope that's the beginning of the total revolution that we've experienced over the last 25 years. My concern is maybe this commission started too late. Maybe it's not been empowered as much as it should. I was surprised when I think the council said that we are not a court. It's a bit disheartening because I think there's a lot of investment in this, abroad and in the country, and the ordinary people who volunteer to leave their jobs and come and testify that something substantial should happen now, not 20 years from now. The guys who benefited from this are the 20 to 30-year-olds of 1992. In other words, they served the middle third of their life in prosperity, ill-gotten. Houses they did not build, facilities never would have achieved in normal circumstances. Now, 2019, we say enough is enough. Meanwhile, 20 years of hardship and toil, during which a lot have shed their blood, thousands have been driven to certain countries as refugees, properties have been confiscated, life has been devastated. And now we have a commission which is not really empowered to do anything, just find out. Space of life is at most 6 years, 20 years to build something, 20 years, and then the 40 years for so and so. I don't think this country can afford to do that. For a commission of this magnitude, in terms of the negative implications on the country, there ought to be something that should be more manifestly high profile, to be able to remedy the fundamental things which are there, because the guys who profited 20 years ago are still running the show. And this is the tragedy of it. So I hope that it will be possible for this commission to empower itself. That's not correct, lawyers, when you talk to lawyers. You can't give yourself power. But I mean, the amount of work and intention you put in this is very encouraging. But some people will prefer a lot more than this in terms of its executive role and the impact it can have, even within, because the way it's going, it will go another 20 years before all the formats are put. Because if you spend sort of 2 days just looking at the medical evidence, covering just 1 or 2 days, what about the gigantic social problems which are underlying the political situation? Because all the answer lies somewhere. The dispenser, the guy in the ferry, these are all permutations of the same thing. So it's a huge task, but it is good that we are beginning. But it would be a tragedy for you to complete all the things, identify the key problems. Everybody says what the key problem is. To do something drastic and something meaningful. We have heard in the grapevine that certain countries have indicted certain individuals for various times. But it's my view that we ought to do the first before you go to Ghana to answer for Ghanaian robbers being killed or whatever. What about the area, the main thing that is really causing this? Should other countries take it from our example, or do we have to wait until somebody does something? I think this is a moral issue which you as commissioners have to accept. It's to be done properly and expeditiously in the sense of justice. In the sense of justice. I'm looking at it, Chairman, from the narrow medical perspective of what I saw happen just for a few people who, ethnic Gambians, civil Gambians, they got everything in the book to qualify as as Gambian citizens, being denied access to a government facility on the basis of their political thing, which in fact was wrongly flawed. I think it's important to know what the truth is, what to do, but experience here to be able to ratify, a lot of the guys who are still in punishment for what they suffered, and be something to say, okay, now we've got this thing, we've got to process this, we've got to have a judicial angle to it, because this is not judicial, it's not a criminal court, you can't exercise anything like that. To be able to combat our wishes, the wishes that make some of us leave our work to come and testify, just to correct a small thing, to make it wholesome. I think the people have got, nobody would refuse to come to the commission, so it's up to the commission to use what it has got to do what you know now is the main cause of the problem. Mr. Chairman, I don't want to take any more of your time, except to thank you for giving me the privilege, and whatever I did is what the Colony Clinic stands for since the beginning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. The bravery hasn't diminished one bit. Thanks for your service, and it's a pleasure for us and an honor to have you to come and testify before the Commission. Council, do you have any points to raise before we go into private session?
Yes, well, was just to remind that we may need to go into private session for the admission of the documents. But that said, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. CEESAY for such a wonderful testimony. It's highly appreciated. And also to allay your fears that the Commission would do what is expected of it.
Okay.
The recommendations would come. And we are considering when is the best time to make what recommendations. But they would surely come. But just also to reiterate that there are certain expectations that are beyond the remit of this Commission and fall squarely on the lap of the politicians. When the recommendations come, I hope that the Gambian public would hold the public officials accountable as to how they deal with the recommendations that this commission or other commissions would submit to them. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman Council, for that. We will see you again Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Very much. Okay.